If you think slavery is over, if you think being black is not a problem, if you think your color doesn't matter, this story is for you. For centuries, millions of Africans were torn from their lands, chained and enslaved by European colonizers. The crimes of slavery were not only physical, but also psychological: whipped, raped, and dehumanized. Our ancestors carried scars that still live in the body and the mind of Black people today, from Martinique to Guadeloupe. From Haiti to the United States, the trauma of slavery echoes across generations. High rates of stress, broken families, identity struggles, and deep inequalities. These wounds are not the past, they are still here. This video exposes the truth. White crimes of slavery were not just history. They created the world we live in today. And until justice and recognition come, the chains of oppression remain invisible but real. Welcome to the New African. It is said that if your memory fails you, you are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, this rings true for the West, whose leaders seem intent on rewriting history to suit their narrative. To understand the present and navigate the future, it is vital that we understand the past. Let us take, for example, the issue of race relations. You cannot talk about the racial tensions that exist between blacks and whites without talking about the role that slavery played in perpetuating these tensions. In an attempt to downplay their role in the atrocities of slavery, some have gone so far as to argue that slavery was not that bad. Some will say Africans sold other Africans into slavery. Some will say slavery was necessary for the industrialization of Europe or America. Others will say the Bible condones slavery, conveniently ignoring the fact that the same Bible says what therefore God has joined together. Let no man put asunder. In essence, what all of these arguments boil down to is one thing, and that is white supremacy. One way or another, they all serve to shift blame away from the perpetrators and onto the victims. The worst part of it all is that many blacks buy into this narrative and internalize the feeling of guilt, believing that they themselves are somehow responsible for the horrors of slavery. What we must remember is that slavery was forced upon us. Europeans came to Africa with guns and with greed in their hearts. They did not care whether you were Christian, Muslim, or traditional. They did not care whether you supported them or not. All they cared about was making a profit. They raided our villages in the dead of the night and took our men, women, and children away from us. Those who resisted were killed. Those who cooperated were rewarded with trinkets and baubles, which in turn fueled the slave trade even further. We must never forget that slavery was forced upon us, and its effects are still being felt today. If you think slavery is over, you're wrong. As Frederick Douglass once said, slavery is like a heavy blanket. It weighs you down when you try to go up. Today, blacks continue to be subjected to police brutality, racial profiling, and mass incarceration at rates disproportionate to their population. Despite laws prohibiting discrimination, blacks are still denied equal access to quality housing, education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. All of this can be traced back to the original sin of slavery. As Kwame Nkrumah once said, "We are not going to run after the Europeans to ask them to give us equality. We are going to take it." To do this, however, requires that we first understand the nature of the beast we are dealing with. And nowhere is this more important than in understanding the psychology of racism. Racism is a learned behavior. It is taught to us from childhood. We learn it through our interactions with other people, through the media, through books, and through movies. But the most powerful way we learn racism is through our socialization in white supremacist culture. When we are socialized in a white supremacist culture, we learn to see white people as superior and non-white people as inferior. We learn to believe that white people are more intelligent, more civilized, and more capable than non-white people. And we learn to view non-white people as less than human, as objects to be used and abused. One of the ways in which white supremacy is maintained is through the control of narratives. The dominant group, which in this case is the white group, seeks to maintain its power by controlling the stories that are told about the past and the present. For example, many white Americans like to tell the story of Thanksgiving as a time when pilgrims from Europe came to America and shared a feast with the Native Americans. However, this story ignores the fact that the Native Americans had been living on the land for thousands of years before the Pilgrims arrived. It also ignores the fact that the Pilgrims had come to steal the land from the Native Americans. By controlling the narrative, the dominant group is able to maintain its power and privilege. Another way in which white supremacy is maintained is through the use of dog whistles. Dog whistles are subtle cues that are used to communicate with members of the dominant group. These cues often rely on stereotypes and prejudice, and they serve to reinforce the superiority of the white group. For example, when someone says "welfare queen," they are using a dog whistle that relies on the stereotype of the black woman as a lazy and promiscuous person. By using this dog whistle, the speaker is able to communicate his or her racist views without explicitly saying them out loud. Finally, white supremacy is maintained through the use of microaggressions. Microaggressions are everyday acts of racism that occur in subtle ways. They are often unintentional, but they can be incredibly harmful. For example, when someone says "I don't see color," they are engaging in a microaggression by saying that they don't see color. They are ignoring the reality of racism, and they are sending the message that being black is somehow a problem. Microaggressions are harmful because they reinforce the idea that black people are less than white people. They send the message that black people are not welcome in white spaces and that they must be constantly on guard against racism. Microaggressions are also harmful because they contribute to the normalization of racism. When we allow microaggressions to go unchecked, we are sending the message that racism is acceptable. We are normalizing racism when we should be working to stamp it out. To overcome the psychology of racism, we must first become aware of it. We must learn to recognize the ways in which we are socialized in white supremacist culture, and we must be aware of the ways in which racism manifests itself in our everyday lives. Once we become aware of the psychology of racism, we can begin to challenge it. We must learn to question the stories that we have been told about the past and the present. We must learn to challenge racist dog whistles and microaggressions when we hear them. And we must work to create a world in which all people are treated equally regardless of their race. If you think being black is not a problem, you're wrong. If you think your color doesn't matter, you're wrong. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The fight for racial equality is not just a fight for black people. It is a fight for all of humanity. As Nelson Mandela once said, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion." People must learn to hate, and it is taught to them. We must teach our children to be kind and compassionate towards all people, regardless of their race or religion. Only then can we hope to create a better world for all of us. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Catch you guys next time.